video. So in this video I want to go through 10 tips to improve your computing experience. So I've broken these up into non-software, non-hardware, so kind of software things you can do to improve your experience, software-based things, and then also hardware improvements. So let's start this thing. So if you're watching this video, you probably have an old system and you get frustrated with it every time you try and do something. You turn it on and it's just so slow, and you can't perform basic tasks such as Microsoft Word and Excel, and then you're trying to conduct your stats and you just it doesn't work. Okay, so one thing you can try is a different operating system. So majority of you will already know about Windows and Mac OS, but there are Linux-based systems such as Manjaro and Ubuntu, which are almost identical and are less resource intensive, so they don't use as much memory and CPU. So if you have a really low performance, low stats, low hardware grade system, then these operating systems work a lot better. So I've actually used these in a really old, there was a Celeron system. It came out, by the looks of it, it came out at the time where DDR2 had just started phasing in, because it had the option for either running 2 sticks of DDR1 or 2 sticks of DDR2 memory. And also still ran off AGP graphics cards. And I installed Windows 10 and it would just not run. It would just lag so much and it'd be so frustrating, and that's because of the memory intensity that the Windows 10 required, and also just the CPU performance as well. So a single core Celeron struggles to support Windows 10. So I was like, okay, let me try something else, and I tried Manjaro, and since then I've always had a Manjaro boot flash on hand. So if I ever go to fix someone's system, have a look at it, I always carry that, just in case I want to just see if that works better than Windows 10. If I need to change operating systems and I know Windows 10 won't work, then I can at least use Manjaro. One issue you will come across using these Linux-based operating systems is obviously from the point of view of programs. So not every program will be available, which can be an issue. A lot of programs are moving over, so Steam, for instance. So for those of you who want a game, Linux-based operating systems are heading that way. I think you can play a majority of games on them. So they really work, and most of them are free. They do have a learning curve as well, which is kind of, you'll have to watch some videos first of all to install, if you're not familiar with installing operating systems. And also, if a lot of them are based off code as opposed to clicking programs. So like Windows is very much, you can double click on a program and it'll open, whereas Linux-based operating systems, majority of them you would have to type in the script or the command to run a program. But they're really good substitutes, and they just work. I mean, personal experience, I've used Manjaro, and I've got a Raspberry Pi, so I've used Raspbian, and it doesn't take that long to learn how they work, and they're just really good substitutes. And as I had previously said, they're low resource intensive, so if you have a really old system, it's a good thing to start off with. If you don't want to tear yourself away from your Windows operating system, one tip I really recommend is to disable startup programs. When you install a lot of programs, what you don't know is that you actually, there's a little box that says run on startup, and people generally don't untick that because they don't think, they just, like, you tick the box terms and conditions and then you go accept, and it's like, it's one of those things that you want the program to be installed so you can use it. Now, what happens is when your computer boots up and it boots into Windows, all these programs that you've left to run on startup now start running, and that's going to pull memory resources and CPU resources. So it's just going to drain your system, and it's going to make it really slow, and that's where people generally get frustrated. Like, oh, the system takes so long to start up, and generally it will be the worst when you're in a rush to get a presentation ready to I don't know, I think most of the time I see it when people are trying to get their presentations ready, when they're gonna like proposal presentations and all that, and that's generally when the system just wants to be like, nope, I'm gonna be slow on startup, and I'm gonna make you wait like 5 minutes or whatever. So one thing you can do is to disable startup programs. Now this is really easy to do. You just gotta go to Task Manager. So I generally right click on the taskbar and then go Task Manager, or if you want to go Control Alt Delete and then go to Task Manager, that's also an option. So when you open Task Manager, I have this for another thing, for another talk anyway. So you'll have the different tabs at the top. Go to Startup, and then what you'll see here is you'll see all the programs, their status, so whether whether they're gonna start on startup or not, and then you also see what their impact is. And the last BIOS time, as far as I understand, this is the time it takes for your system to start up. You know, if this is really high, so 16.7 seconds, I still find this a bit on the slow side. Disable all these programs. So if you run uTorrent, if you run Discord, if you run Steam. I actually saw a meme about this the other day, and I found it quite funny because it's true. If you have an old system and people leave Epic Games Store, Steam, Discord, uTorrent, what was the other one? There was another one that I was thinking of. Skype as well. If you leave those to run on startup, then you're going to slow your system, because now your system's going to be like, okay, I gotta get these programs going. There are essential programs that you do need to have running on startup, but generally majority of them you can close. I mean, essential programs, when I say essential, I mean like your antivirus systems and all your antivirus programs and all those things. Okay, the next thing was don't leave programs running in the background. Now, I know many students, students are actually the biggest culprit of this probably, because as a student I tend to have one Microsoft Word open, one Excel. Actually, I generally have two Words, two Excels. I have R Commander in the background. I may have Spotify. I'll have about 20 PDFs open. I'll have Firefox open as well, or Chrome, depending on what browser I have on the system. I mean, if it's a university system, they don't always have Firefox on it. So, and then I'll have lots of Firefox tabs open, and then also if I'm not listening to Spotify, I might have the YouTube video docked out, and then I'll be watching that in the background, and it's like your system struggles. So just to show you, so I've just got a couple of things open, and that's 40% memory that's being used. Now if I go performance, this to give you a number, 6.4 gigs of memory. Now if your system is really old, like let's say from DDR2 memory era, the most you will have in your system is 4 gigs of memory. I mean, unless you're running like a server with Windows 10 and you've got a server motherboard, then obviously you can have more. But so like my old system was DDR2, and the most I could do with it was 4 gigs of memory. And the fact that all of these background processes are reaching 6.4 gigs would mean that my system would end up crashing at some point, or just be really slow and I wouldn't be able to get anywhere. So one thing that you must do is try and limit how many programs are open. Now I know this is very difficult, especially if you're writing your thesis, you're finishing writing up your paper, or you're putting together your proposal or your review. You know, you generally have a lot of things open because you don't want to close them in case, you know, you lose everything, and you can't get back to where you were, or there's always a reason. But at the same time, you know, if you're going to eventually use all the memory in your system and it's just going to crash, it's going to give you a blue screen, then is it really worth it? So yeah, so it's very easy to just end the tasks or programs that you don't need. And generally, if you open Task Manager, there'll be more programs than you actually knew you had open. So there might be background processes, yeah, that you can actually close that you don't actually need open. So yeah. My next point was don't have unnecessary programs installed and don't clog your system. Alright, so I'm pretty sure lots of you have parents and grandparents that they'll ask you to have a look at their system. You'll turn on the system and you can't even see the wallpaper because there's just icons everywhere on the desktop. And it's like, I know that's a bit of a misconception that clogging your system. I was told that a lot, that oh no, you can't have so many icons on your system, it's just gonna it's not really that true. It's not it's not that true. So the only reason I say don't clog your system is, you know, your hard disk space is very important to keep. You know, it improves your system in the long run. So generally what people do is they just buy a extra internal hard drive or an extra external, and they just back up or whatever. So that works. But another thing you can do, which is free, is install a program like Clean Master, which in my experience does really well at cleaning your system. It has other things like boosting memory, boosting your speed system. I don't really know how well that works. I mean, that's like a LTT video to do, to check whether it actually does anything. But yeah, so Clean Master is free, it's really good, it does a good job, and it just, you know, keeps your system healthy. And remember, disable it on startup, because it is one of those things, see and tray, that is quite impactful on startup. And yeah. Okay, another thing is, this is the last of the non-hardware tips, is to overclock your system. Okay, so this is for the more tech savvy of you, and it's also the most riskiest of the tips. So make sure you know what you're doing. Watch other videos, watch people do overclocking, make sure you know what your specific CPU and memory, and if you're going to overclock your graphics card, make sure that you know what they can handle, what their limit is. Don't go beyond that, because you don't want to damage your hardware, you don't want to damage your system. So that's why I'm saying be careful with overclocking. I overclocked my old system a bit, but like ever so slightly, so it's just got that much more performance. But it's my old system, it's my secondary system, so I use it in cases of emergency, so it's fine that I overclock that. So be careful in overclocking, but it's an option and it does work. Okay, so now we're on to the hardware aspect of it. So a lot of you may have seen my previous videos where I took buying guide and all that, and a lot of you probably watch Kyle and Linus and them doing their own builds, right? So you have a basic idea of what the different components are, and also just kind of the age and the performance levels and all of that. So watch the videos, because it'll definitely help going into this next section. Okay, so the first thing on my hardware upgradability, so now this is going to be your expensive area. So CPU. So your CPU is important. Generally for basic tasks you don't need much more than a quad core, so Ryzen 3 3200 will do you fine, or 2200, or even a 16 what was it, 1600, yeah. Generally that will do you fine with most processors. 3 gigahertz is more than enough. I mean, people still run, as I said, old systems that run off LGA 775 socket Intel CPUs, and they're still able to perform the basic tasks of Word and Excel and PowerPoint. If you're going to run more intensive tasks, then I suggest upgrading to at least a 6-core CPU. Anything kind of higher than that is not really necessary. Obviously, if you're doing lots of video rendering and all those types of things, the more cores, the better. Gaming is not really core intensive. If you're building a server, if your system's functioning as a server alongside it, then look into a higher core CPU as well. Next was memory. So to me, memory is the first thing that you upgrade of a system, and it actually probably has one of the biggest impacts. That's in at least my personal experience. Whenever someone comes in with a old system, that's the first thing. Like, okay, let's try some better memory, and that generally makes such a difference. And memory is also one of the few things you can upgrade on a laptop, which is also quite good. So then, if you've got an old laptop and you can't upgrade your CPU, then at least you can upgrade your memory. And just to kind of show you, so I don't use Photoshop, I use Krita, and if I open, yeah, it doesn't matter what I open it. So if I open this, if it decides to open, see, even now my system is getting quite memory intensive. So if I open something like this, and then I go to Task Manager, you can really see that I'm using 503 megabytes, so half a gig. So if I have another, if I open that another what? 60 gigs. So if I open that another 32 times, then essentially I will be reaching the limit on my memory, and not even, because actually this is 1 gig and already there was 6 gigs used before. Yeah, so yeah, so memory is very important, and also I guess it depends on what kind of work you're doing. If you're doing something like Photoshop or using Krita, if you're doing video rendering, I recommend getting large memory, so 16 and higher, 16 gigs and higher. 8 gigs is generally fine if you're just going to game on your system. Anything kind of below that is just, I don't know, it's not future proof. So rather, if you're going to upgrade memory, go as high as possible for your system. It's a future proof thing, and allows you to do what you need to do. I don't think really stats programs are that memory intensive, so 16 gigs is fine, but yeah. Alright, third was the GPU, the graphics card. Now, graphics cards are not that important. Unless you're doing video rendering and gaming, it's not something that you need to worry about upgrading if you don't have that much money to upgrade your system. If you've got a monitor that requires an HDMI port and doesn't have support for VGA, then okay, you might be in a tight spot and you might have to get a graphics card, but graphics cards are not that necessary. Obviously, if your gaming experience is very poor on the system, then maybe look into it, but when you're building a system for gaming, generally half of your budget should go to your graphics card. Okay, so my fourth point was SSD versus a hard drive. So using an SSD as a boot drive is just so much better. It's just going to make your system start up so much quicker, and it just really gives a lot better of a computing experience. And then hard drives are obviously cheaper and have a lot of space. So both of these are easy things to upgrade, and they're good choices. If you've got an old system and you've already got a hard drive, an SSD. If you've got an old system and it's you're running out of space, then you can get another internal hard drive. It's also good to have external hard drives. Just it's better for backup. I mean, it stays far away from your system. So if your system, whatever, for whatever reason catches on fire, then at least you know you've got your data backed up somewhere. Also, cloud storage is also a good idea. And the final thing is, because of COVID-19, majority of us are on lockdown, so clean your system. This prevents overheating, and heating is not a good thing for the system, not just because it can make your system slower, but because it can damage your hardware. Also, if you've got extra budget and money lying around and you've got space in your case, install fans. This just improves cooling. If you can move to a liquid cooling system, those generally are, well, actually there's debates on that, but those can be better than an air-cooled system, although I guess it is all relative. So clean your system. Get rid of that dust. I mean, I don't know how many systems I look at and it's like cobwebs and all that inside, and it just, it's like when the person's like, oh, my system is so slow, it's like I open up, I see what the dust is, like, okay, here's one reason. And this is something that you can do for really cheap. Just open up your case, turn up your computer, open up your case, and just go through a spring cleaning of your system. Yeah. So I guess those are my 10 points. If there's any points that you feel that I should have included in this, please put them in the comments section. If you liked this video, please hit the like button. I don't know what other kind of top 10 things I can do like this. And yeah, subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.